Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Journey Forward with Jory Rose. I am really looking forward to this conversation today with Dr. Debi Silber. Welcome to the show. I know even just in our pre-recording conversation, we could just talk for a super long time. So I know it's going to be an exciting conversation for our listeners. So please introduce yourself and tell us what you do and how do you show up in the world?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. And I know it's one of those things that it's almost, we want to not chat so much beforehand because we want to make sure we capture all the goodness for everybody, right? So I'm the founder and CEO of the PBT Institute. PBT stands for Post-Betrayal Transformation Institute. And I mean, I've been in mindset, personal development, health since 1991. So since longer than many of your listeners have been on the planet. And my business just kept morphing and changing as I did. And then it was, I had a hard, you don't study something like betrayal unless you have to, Right. And I had a really painful betrayal. It was my family years ago. And I thought I did the work I needed to do to heal. And apparently there was more work to do. And then I had another opportunity. And this time it was my husband. And anybody who's been through it, just blindsided, devastated, my life as I had known it just came to a crashing halt. And that's really where the story begins. Yeah. We often delve deeper into what we most need. And then when we recognize if I can heal through this, then I can help others heal through this as well. And that was my pledge to myself. If I can heal from this, I'm taking everybody with me. Yeah. And, because I had never been, I had been through other traumas and nothing felt like this. And anybody who's been through it knows, just how painful it is. It's when the people or the person who gave you a sense of safety and security is the one to shatter it. It's terrifying, and it tattoos itself on your body, mind, and heart. So I love the way you said that it tattoos it, because it feels so permanent and not just in our mindset, but it's one of those things that I know that we embody that pain in a physical way. So it's not just healing the thoughts or managing your relationships externally, like whatever's going on out there is going to show up inside. And this is something I just find fascinating because people assume, oh, I'm doing the work, but if I'm not really doing the work, that tattoo is going to imprint really deep inside. You're so right. And even you could be doing the work cognitively, like you can be going to, let's say, talk therapy, and that helps on one level, but it impacts you, and specifically with betrayal, physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. So it all needs to be addressed and it all needs to be healed. And I didn't know that right when it happened, but I was desperate to understand really how the mind works, why people do these things, and how it could heal. So one of the first things I did was got my husband out of the house. And I thought, okay, I have 4 kids and 6 dogs and a business, and I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm enrolling in. You're one busy mama right there. 6 I was, dogs. But I was like, that's it. I'm enrolling in a PhD program. And I didn't know the first way about how I would do it, but I felt so intuitively guided. And it was in transpersonal psychology, the psychology of transformation and human potential. I was obsessed with transformation because I was changing. I didn't quite understand it. He was on his own, but I wasn't ready to look at that. And I just dove into this program without having any idea of what was going to show up. Wow. And then it was... Isn't that fascinating? Can I just pause you there for a moment? Because, what you did there was you listened to something intuitively that maybe cognitively didn't make a lot of sense, or you didn't have all the information. And I think that's a reflection of true mindful awareness when we can tune into those messages
because I know I've told my listeners so many times, I used to live completely in my head, and my thoughts were that was my truth. So much so I didn't even really feel emotions. I thought emotions, and it's a practice. It's a deep practice to get out of those thoughts and believing them as truth or fact, and actually tune into the messages of the body and trust that to be your guiding light.
Which is so true, but trust, and that's one of the biggest issues. Trust is shattered in betrayal.
Yes.
And so you certainly don't trust your betrayer. You don't even trust yourself, because you're like, I'm a bright person. How did I not know? How did I not see? And I had every reason not to join that program, especially, everybody I mentioned it to, they're like, are you sure you know what you're doing here? I mean, and then I questioned it. I was 50 years old going back for a PhD. Like, what was I thinking? But I just had to. It was the weirdest pull. Anyway, so I go into this program, and it was time to do a study. So I studied betrayal. What holds us back? What helps us heal, and what happens to us physically, mentally, and emotionally when the people closest to us lie, cheat, and deceive.
Wow. Had there been previous studies done in those exact words before? Because that's such a simple yet powerful framework to look deeper into.
Yeah, the way it works with a study is you have to find the gap in the literature, meaning what's been studied and what needs to now be known based on what we see and what hasn't been explored. And there were studies on betrayal. There were studies on something called post-traumatic growth, which is the kind of upside of trauma, how trauma leaves you with a new awareness, perspective, insight. And so I was studying betrayal and post-traumatic growth, but I didn't want like this sort of just shallow but very broad reach. I wanted a deep dive of the lived experience of people, like before, during, after, like the whole thing. And that hadn't been done. So
how did you go about delving into it? What did the actual study look like? And then I'm excited to hear what the results were, because this is what people are going to, because I'm sure everyone who's listening, we all have some degree of betrayal. Can I actually pause you for a second? It may seem like a really simple question. How would you define betrayal?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I define it as the breaking of a spoken or unspoken rule. And every relationship has them. I have one with you right now. We had an agreement. I was going to show up. If I didn't, I would have betrayed you. Now, it wouldn't have shattered you, right? But it's a betrayal nonetheless. The way it works is the more you trust and the more you depend on that person, the deeper the betrayal. So, for example, a child who's completely dependent on their parent, the parent does something horrible, that's going to have a bigger impact than, let's say, your best friend telling your secret. Still a betrayal, but won't have the same physical, mental, emotional consequences.
Yeah. And I love how you differentiate the spoken and unspoken rules, because especially in families, there's a whole buttload of unspoken rules that we're just supposed to live by.
And just because they're not necessarily spoken doesn't mean you don't know what they are. And without your awareness or your consent, when someone decides to break those rules, it shatters. It shatters the foundation of trust. So it does so much damage. So I really look at it as the breaking of those spoken or unspoken rules. And so the way the study worked was, this was a deep dive. I'm like 2.5-hour conversations with each study participant. What was life like before? What happened then? What physical, mental, emotional symptoms? How long did it take to move forward? What did they do that helped? What didn't help? And I mean, the research, what we were learning was mind-blowing. And that was just the tip of the iceberg, I mean, to what we know now. So, so I'm happy.
How many years ago was that study?
This was, my betrayal was September of 2015. And what's so crazy is I did my first TEDx talk 6 weeks afterwards. I don't even know how that happened, but something was going on there. Transformation was happening. And that talk got a lot of views. And I know it's because you could feel it. Something's going on. And it was
as authentic and raw as could be, I would imagine.
It really was. And I wasn't quite ready to talk about it, but you can kind of hear what I'm not saying in between the words. And then it was, I was already enrolled January of 2016. So everything, I mean, the second TEDx talk, the book Trust Again, other books, the From Betrayal to Breakthrough podcast, the PBT Institute, the programs, the certifications, all since that time.
So you have, and I hate to sound cliche-ish, but I know it's powerful, really turned that mess into your message on a really, really broad level to help heal others. And I'm curious, as you were going through this, was it re-triggering some of your own traumas?
It was. And it's interesting because there were so many people that I was seeing one-on-one at the time. And they said, they would come in, just medicated, or that was the only way they could get through the day or get some sleep or whatever. And they were like, how the heck are you doing this? And it was really what I was learning and what was being kind of downloaded. I just kept implementing and it was working. And I guess it was also all those years of the health and the mindset and the personal development were combined with the spirituality and the psychology. And it was sort of mingling all together with this, like, when you found your purpose kind of thing. And it was just a really good recipe.
Oh my gosh. And, I love the idea of post-traumatic growth, but, I often talk with my clients and even on this podcast that you can't just jump to the silver lining, right? That would be the spiritual bypass. You can't just cognitively name that there's going to be benefits after getting through the storm. You've got to feel your way through it to actually grow. Like, the lotus only grows in the mud. You got to really be in the shit to be able to get the growth to occur there.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
So talk a little bit more about post-traumatic growth. And then I want to delve into what did you find in this study?
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear those steps.
Yeah, well, one of the things was, because like I said, I was studying betrayal and post-traumatic growth. I was like, there's got to be an upside if you work through this. But then it hit me. I said, I'd been through death of a loved one. I'd been through disease, but I was at the ICU for 11 days. I'm like, no, betrayal feels so different for me, but I didn't want to assume. So I asked the study participants, I said, if you've been through other traumas besides betrayal, does it feel different for you? Hands down unanimously. They said, oh my gosh, it's so different. This was the first discovery. It's so different because let's say, like, I lost my mom. You grieve, you're sad, you mourn the loss. Life will never be the same, but you don't necessarily take it personally. Betrayal feels personal because it's so intentional. And then it's a complete and total attack to the self, right? Like, think about it. Rejection, abandonment, confidence, worthiness, belonging, trust, they all get shattered.
Safety, security,
everything. So it's a complete and total attack to the self. And the whole self has to be rebuilt. So I was like, it doesn't quite fit the term of post-traumatic growth. It's almost like post-traumatic growth plus. So I coined a new term, and it's post-betrayal transformation. So if I were to give an equation, it would be post-traumatic growth plus rebuilding of the self equals post-betrayal transformation.
Okay, so tell me, what does rebuilding the self look like? Because now we're just kind of peeling back each of the layers, because I might know what that means for me, but that may also be different for a different person.
Yes.
And then I've got another question I'm going to earmark because I don't want to forget. But you said something really fascinating. Is betrayal ever not personal? Is it ever so selfish of the betrayer that it's not personal, or is the reception of it always going to be personal? So we can pause, but I just want to name that because it's an interesting thought that I had. So
yeah, it's very interesting.
Take those wherever you want.
It depends on the betrayer. The betrayer that is so just who they are. That it's just such a shock to just this awakening of, oh my gosh, that's really who they are. And then that's when we have to learn, even though it happened, to us, it's not about us. Because until and unless they're willing to take a look at their own actions, they don't even care, or even remember what they did.
Right.
So that's that piece. Yeah. So
defining the self. Yeah. Healing the self.
Oh yes, absolutely. So we really need to do that total and complete rebuilding of the self. And it really involves trust, which is so foundational to any relationship. Trust is just what gives us that sense of safety and security, which is so basic. So that alone needs to be rebuilt. And then, like I said, rejection, abandonment, belonging, confidence, worthiness, all of that has to be rebuilt. Like, let's say you lose someone you love. Again, you don't maybe feel rejected, right? You don't take it personally. So betrayal has its own unique set of circumstances around it that need attention and all need to heal. So that was the first discovery. That healing from betrayal is so different.
How would someone go about building trust within themselves? Because I would imagine as you're rebuilding that self, that internal work has got to come before you can trust another person again. Because like you said, it becomes, and I've seen this with clients around, how did I not know myself well enough to not know this person might have been the kind of person who fill in the blank.
Yes.
So, and another thing that goes with that is I have a lot of clients who experience difficulty in knowing how to trust themselves, even necessarily when there's been a baseline of a betrayal, but just whether it's in decision making or a lot of that comes around, how do I know myself well enough? And at the root of that, I think, is trusting in your process. So what would you say to guide those people?
Yeah, well, that's exactly why I wrote Trust Again, which, and I include, I have a 4-step trust rebuilding process in there, and I'll go through it with you.
Yeah.
Also, all of the other discoveries are in there, because that's one of the biggest things that happens. When trust is shattered, we lose trust in everyone, everything. In life, and it's terrifying. So, you nailed it, because it's so true, because that shattering of trust is so uncomfortable, but we just want to, let's say, be back in a relationship already or whatever. We're like, all right, enough already. I'll just trust again. And when we completely bypass all of those other stages, it's built on an unstable, rocky foundation, and it's never good. So the first thing is, well, here, let me back up. I look at trust like a brick wall. And that brick wall is constructed by every opportunity that person or those people had to show that they were trustworthy. It's like a brick in the wall, right? And then in one earth-shattering moment, the entire wall comes tumbling down. And so rushing to trust doesn't work, because the only way trust can be rebuilt is the way it was built the first time, brick by brick by brick. So what I see so often with people who've been betrayed, they're so anxious to rush that trust process and even do the work for the betrayer. It's as if the betrayer shattered that brick wall, and now the betrayer's like, all right, you know what, I'll just build it. I'll build that wall again. No. The person who's been betrayed, if they want to, they don't have to. They could look at the rubble and say, this is just way too much work. I don't have the least bit of interest, and they can walk away. But if they are willing to watch that wall be rebuilt, they have to be willing, and the betrayer has to be a really good bricklayer.
Well, and you said a key word there is willing. And to me, I think about mindset, and this all seems near impossible if someone doesn't have the mindset to believe that that wall can be rebuilt. Yeah.
And it's so common. And, I see resistance as one of the biggest blocks to healing.
Yeah.
And that was, there were, and I'll get to the 4-step trust rebuilding process, but I just want to get to this too. There were 3 groups in the study who did not heal. And, you brought to mind one of them. But the 3 were, 1, they were medicating, numbing, avoiding, distracting, whatever they could do just to not feel or face. And I get it. It may have made the day a bit easier to get through, but they didn't heal nearly as well or as quickly as the ones who were like, whatever it takes, I'm moving through this. That was the first group. The second group just refused to accept their betrayal. Nope, not accepting it. Nope, that's my story and I'm sticking with it. And the third, and this group was so interesting, this was the group where the betrayer had very little consequences. So whether it was out of financial fear, religious reasons, that was a big one, fear of breaking up a family, or just fear of change, they did all they could just to put it behind them. I only saw 2 things with this group: a further deterioration of the relationship, and 2, they were by far the most physically sick.
Fascinating.
Your heart can't handle that. It just can't.
No.
So that was, that
it feels like
so
putting
obvious.
putty on that brick wall, and that's really not going to hold anything together, and it's going to seep through those cracks pretty easily. Yeah.
Exactly. So it just didn't work. Okay. So the 4-step trust rebuilding process, and then I could get to the 2 other discoveries. So, and you're so right about building trust in yourself first, but it even starts before that. We have to build trust in the very foundation of life. It's so foundational that with betrayal, that's shattered too. So we have to start with something as basic as, will the sun rise? I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure. Right?
It's funny you said that example, because when you were talking about, trusting in things, I thought, well, at least we can rely on the fact that every day the sun's going to come up and the sun's going to go down, and we will, the sun will come out tomorrow was the thought I had in my head. I was kind of singing to myself.
Yeah. But you know what? With betrayal, we don't know. So you start there and you check and sure enough, there it is. But I'm not sure it's going to happen again tomorrow. And
I can't count on it, because everything else I've counted on, I now can't rely on to be true.
Exactly. So only when you can feel safe and secure that, yep, I can count on the sun rising, do you move to the next level. And that would be trusting in your higher wisdom, your wise inner guide, your intuition, which so often we turn down. And our gut's like 10,000 times more perceptive than our mind. So we need to trust that. If you go into a dark alley at night and it feels weird and creepy, trust it. You see 2 babies giggling and it brings this sense of joy and expansion and it feels good. Trust it, right? And we forget that our body is letting us know.
Can I insert something in there for a second?
Yeah.
Because this is something I think is so huge, is to trust that inner gut as your truth, as your guide. And one of the areas I see this being shut down the most is parents shutting down this for kids when parents don't want to share the realities of what's going on. I've had clients, and let's say if the child or teenager comes to the parent to say, hey, why is dad sleeping in the guest room? Is something wrong with you guys? It feels kind of weird. And the mom isn't ready to share that they're getting separated. So the mom will say, or dad, whomever, no, honey, everything is fine. We're all good. He snores. And, in that kind of example, I will tell my clients, hey, you've just taught your child not to trust their inner wisdom, that something is off.
Not only that, they're teaching them not to trust their mom.
That's exactly what I was going to say next. Like, look at how subtle these betrayals of trust can look like in everyday situations, even if it's not a big thing. And that's why I wanted to point this out, because I see this a lot, whether it's, especially with all the things we've got going on in our world, it's easy to say to kids, oh, don't worry, it's going to be fine. You're going to be okay. And no, we need to honor what they're feeling and then use that as a sounding board to have an honest conversation. But it creates a lot of fear.
Absolutely.
But I think that part, and it's hard enough for adults to trust our own gut, but we've also got to cultivate the believing in our gut as truth from as early as we can for our kids.
It gives us a sense of personal power and strength, and we feel supported.
Yes.
And that's why when we're rebuilding trust, it's one of the things we need to build, because we're so terrified and we need to have that sense of safety and security back. So so trusting in the very foundation of life, and then trusting in our gut and strengthening that is so important. So that would be exactly, you said it, and that's level 2. Then once you can do that, you move to the 3rd level, and that's learning to trust in yourself again, because once we're betrayed, we don't trust ourselves. So you give yourself little tasks and then you do them. I'm going to drink that glass of water, and then you do. I'm going to make that phone call, and then you do. I will not call my ex, and then you don't. Whatever it is for you.
I'm not going to stalk his social media and pretend like it doesn't bother me.
And then you don't, right? And what you're doing is you're teaching yourself, when I say something, I mean it. My word is gold. And that's so important. And now you could feel this like sense of safety and security building, right? You built that foundation again. You built that, you strengthen your intuition. You can be trusted, right? You have sort of these invisible bodyguards. Only from that space do you then look to slowly, carefully learn to trust in other people again.
Well, and I imagine too, another area I see a lot of my clients getting stuck in is in self-worth. And so that seems to be an important piece in building up the self-worth, that I am worthy enough for someone to be in partnership, relationship, whatever kind of relationship it is, in which I deserve honesty, safety, communication, security, all of those things. Because if we don't have the self-worth, we're likely going to put ourselves in a position to not make the safety be there, because we're not feeling like I will, that must just be me.
And, and I love that you said that, because I can spot a betrayal, and within the PBT community, this is how we know someone is unhealed. And it shows up in every area of life, in work, in health, in relationships. So for example, if you have repeat betrayals, it's an unhealed betrayal, because there probably is a very profound message that you're worthy, lovable, deserving. You need better boundaries in place, whatever it is. And until and unless you learn that, you will keep getting opportunities to learn just that. And so if you're bouncing around and you're from boss to boss, or friend to friend, or partner to partner, you're like, what the heck? Is it me? Yes, it is, in the way that there's something really, really powerful for you to learn. Like in my instance, I was never on my own to-do list. I was like, what's common to these two betrayals? My needs never really mattered. And I was like, well, that's it. And that was one of the biggest reasons why I was like, that's it. I'm enrolling in this PhD program. It's my turn. But that decision changed my life, changed my life. And it led to everything else. And I'll share that too. And I just also want to share this with betrayal. And we've proven this in the community and in the study and all of this. Healing and rebuilding is always a choice, whether you heal yourself and move on. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did with my family. It just wasn't an option to rebuild with them. Or if the situation lends itself, if you're willing and you want to, you rebuild something entirely new with the person who hurt you. And not long ago, my husband and I married each other again as two totally different people. But you have to have this complete and utter destruction of the old. And that allows for the birth of the new. And
you can't try to just live within the pain of the old and work through that. It literally is, in case of marriage number two, even if it's the same person.
Exactly. And I see so many people where they're so afraid to end the old version of them, the old version of the relationship. And because of that, they never have that opportunity to rebirth the new. So I'm amazed, and I just want to honor you, because that is such a reflection of your own deep healing, that you and your husband can be where you are now. I would say it was the hardest thing I've ever done. And like healing and moving on from my family was a cakewalk compared to healing and rebuilding with my husband. But I'll tell you, it's been, for all of us, my entire family, they're 4 best friends now, and we're better than ever. And we're having so much fun. It's really like an entirely new relationship and a second opportunity, really, for both of us. But you're right, because my ego was screaming every step of the way here. There wasn't one cell of me that was okay with betrayal. So I'm drinking my own Kool-Aid, for sure. Yeah.
Well, and, it's fascinating too, as I think through, my experiences with the clients over the years as well. It would seem that we have to be willing to really get out of our story. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I'm really fascinated with, is our stories and how it serves us to stay stuck. And that part of what serves us to stay stuck is identity, right? Mm-hmm. We have this identity of how we share our narrative. And if I shift the narrative, then it becomes, well, who am I without this narrative? And that becomes almost scarier in this unknown than it is to have this painful narrative.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're so right. And that's the thing. And I've seen people, they will stay with weight. They will stay with a health issue. They would stay with whatever, because it's what they know. And what's unfamiliar is just too scary.
It feels intolerable. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's something that really leads to the second discovery, which you will see exactly what I'm talking about with staying stuck. What the second discovery was, while we can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, and so many of us do, if we're going to fully heal, we're going to move through 5 now proven predictable stages. And what's even more exciting about that is now we know what happens physically, mentally, and emotionally at every stage. And we know what we need to do to move from one stage to the next. So what's so exciting about that discovery is now healing is predictable. Because if someone knows where they are and knows what to do to move, it's inevitable. They will. And I'm happy to go through the 5 stages.
I would love that, because I think people need to know what can I hold on to? What can that look like? I think that's partly what can give people hope.
Oh, they will know exactly where they are when I go through.
All right, let's delve into that.
All right. And they're in much greater detail in Trust again, but here's the synopsis right here. So the stage 1 is like a setup stage. And I saw this with every single study participant, me included. If you imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. What I saw with everybody was this real heavy lean on the physical and the mental, and kind of neglecting the emotional and the spiritual. So what does that look like? Looks like we're really good at thinking and doing, and kind of turning down the feeling and being. But the feeling and being is where our intuition lies. So anyway, if you have a table with only 2 legs, it's easy for that table to topple over. That was us. That's not to say if you're busy, it's a setup for betrayal. It's just what I typically saw. Stage 2, hardest stage, scariest by far. And this is the shock, the breakdown of the body, the mind, the worldview. D-Day, Discovery Day. This is the day that person takes a mask off saying, oh no, this is who I've been this whole time.
It's like a Scooby-Doo episode. Wait, you were under the mask the whole time?
Yeah, and it's terrifying. And I remember one of my study participants saying, you know what it feels like? It feels like every negative emotion you can experience, getting punched in the gut and losing a child in a crowd, all at the same time. It's awful. Everybody knows. Stomach
just as you said that.
Everybody knows exactly where they were on their D-Day, right? It's this psychological earthquake. Now life is compartmentalized into before it happened and after it happened.
Right. And that moment gets imprinted in the brain.
That's the one. That's the one right there. So now a few things that happen. You ignite the stress response. So you're headed for every single stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease. Your mind is in a complete state of chaos and overwhelm. You cannot wrap your mind around what you just learned. And your worldview is totally shattered. Your worldview, that's your mental model. These are the rules. This is how it works. Don't go there. You could trust that person. And in one earth-shattering moment, it's all been destroyed. Here's truly where the bottoms out on you. And it's terrifying. And no new bottom is showing up yet. So, but think about it. If you were walking down the street and the bottom were to bottom out on you, what would you do? You'd grab hold of anything and everything you could.
Grasping, clinging.
That's it, to stay alive. That's stage 3. Survival instincts emerge. It's the most practical of all the stages. If you can't help me, get out of my way.
How our brains were designed, right? It's how we were designed, is for that survival. Except when we're stuck in those survival patterns for too long, it does not serve us.
You'll see it right here. It's, who can I trust? Where do I go? How do I feed my kids? Where do I live? Right? It's practical. But here's the trap. Because stage 3 feels so much better than the shock and trauma where you just came from, you think it's good. And you're like, whew, okay, let me settle in here. You have no idea there's a stage 4 and stage 5 waiting. Transformation hasn't even begun yet. That happens in stages 4 and stage 5. And a few things happen. The first is you start getting all these small self benefits from being here. You get your story, which we talked about, right? You get to be right. You get someone to blame. You get a target for your anger. You get sympathy from everybody you share your story with. You don't have to do the hard work of learning to trust again. Do I trust you? Do I trust you? Forget it. I'm not trusting anybody. Right.
And in the process, as you describe all that, I also the feeling I had in my body was, you're also putting this armor around you. It's very disconnecting, self-righteous and yet disconnecting all at the same time.
It's yep, I am keeping the bad ones out, but I'm keeping the good ones out too. You are protecting yourself. And then what happens is you're not supposed to stay in this stage for a long time, but you don't know there's anywhere else to go. So the next thing that happens is
you're probably really proud of yourself because you're like, look at all that I'm doing, right? That doing stage, which people can think that that's feeding their sense of self by the doing.
Yes. And then, so your mind starts doing things like, well, maybe you deserved it. Maybe you're not that great. Maybe this is the best you could hope for. Maybe you better figure out a way to make this work, right? You start doing all that mindset stuff. So now you're planting deeper roots. Now you know how it works. Like energy attracts like energy. So now you're attracting people and circumstances and relationships to you to confirm, well, this is where I belong. This is my new home now. And now the roots are even deeper. It gets worse, but I'll get you out of it. Don't worry. Now, because this is where you are, you have no idea it gets any better. Your mind is poisoning you now, thinking this is as good as it's going to get. You're trying to resign yourself to believing this is it, but you don't like it and you don't feel good. So here's where you start using food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, keeping busy, reckless behavior to numb, avoid, distract yourself. You do it for a day, a week, a month, a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years.
I want to avoid this painful feeling at all costs because it's too heavy to carry.
Yeah. So I can see someone 20 years out and say, do you think that eating issue or that drinking or that the pills you take to help you sleep has anything to do with your betrayal? And they would say, oh my gosh, that happened 20 years ago. But do you see, they were in this perpetual holding pattern since then. That's why stage 3 is the most common stage to stay stuck. And that's where most people stay after betrayal.
Wow.
And they go from relationship to relationship and like, what the heck? And that's why they're stuck. If you're willing to let go of all those small self-benefits, you're willing to see, if you're willing to face it, you grieve, there's a bunch of things you do, you move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. Here's where you acknowledge, I can't change what happened, but I can control what I do with it now. So I always liken this to, like, if you've ever moved to a new house, office, condo, apartment, whatever, your stuff's not all there. It's not quite cozy yet, but it's going to be okay. And when you're in that stage, you start turning the stress response down. You're not healing just yet, but you're not causing the massive damage you were causing in stage 2 and stage 3. This is what's so interesting to this stage also. If you were moving, you don't necessarily take everything with you, right? You don't take the stuff that doesn't represent who you want to be in your new space. If your friends weren't there for you, here's where you've just outgrown them. You don't take them with you. And it's so common. People say to me all the time, what the heck? I've had these friends for years. Is it me? Yes, it is. You're undergoing this transformation.
Oh, Debbie, I lost so many friends through my divorce.
Yeah.
I was really surprised. And unfortunately, I had to be okay with it because I knew it was me who changed, not them.
Exactly.
And also the other, the kind of the shadow side of that is growth is threatening to many people.
It is.
And they don't want to see me growing because I had this hunch that it would have been easier for them to see me staying suffering in stage 3 because it likely aligned with their own suffering, being unhappy perhaps in their marriage.
Yes.
They didn't want to see me moving on and growing because then it's like, oh shit, what am I going to do now?
Exactly. And that's the thing. When we're going from that stage 3 to stage 4, it's not them. It is us. And it's very awkward and uncomfortable because now people are forced to take a look at what they're unwilling to do or not ready to do. They see you undergoing this transformation and it's a big shakeup all around. So
and it's kind of why that's, and I see that, as that spiritual path sometimes being a lonely path. Because I think the other piece and what I've experienced personally and professionally is when you start going through that transformation, it's not judgment, but I know for me, the tolerance kind of goes down a little bit because I know the growth is possible. Yeah. And it's not a judgment on people who aren't choosing that path of growth or transformation, regardless of whatever they're stuck in their lives. But once you recognize and embody that growth is possible, you want to surround yourself by people who believe that.
That's it, because you also know how much better it feels.
Yes.
And you
even if your circle is a whole lot smaller, it's a lot cleaner.
Yeah. And you also need that support to help keep you there, because until you are living there full time, it's easy to slip, but every time you do, it doesn't feel good. So it's so helpful to have that group that you're resonating differently. Everybody's talking about different things. They're inspiring and encouraging you.
Your values change a little bit. How you spend your time and attention change a little bit when you've gone through growth and transformation.
Absolutely. And that brings us to stage 5, which is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. So when you've lived in stage 4 for a while, it's comfortable, you've made it your own. Now, things like self-love, self-care, you didn't have the bandwidth for any of that. You were surviving, eating well, exercising. Now you want to love and take care of yourself. Your mind, you're making all new rules and boundaries based on where you've been. And you have a new worldview based on what you see so clearly now. That's what the transformation provides. And the 4 legs of the table, remember at the beginning, it was just physical, mental. By this point, we're so solidly grounded. We're focused on the emotional and the spiritual too. Those are the 5 stages.
I think it's brilliant. I love the work that you're doing. And I can see this applying to a lot of different types of betrayal, because I think it's easy to assume kind of the big one. And yet there's all little micro transgressions that can cause mistrust in relationship. I know, I'm sure you've heard of Terry Real, who does relational therapy. He's phenomenal. And, he refers to it as relationships die a death of 1,000 paper cuts. That it's oftentimes not the big transgressions, but it's those little mini micro ones that over time build resentment, disconnection, lack of safety, trust, communication, vulnerability that is going to just devalue your sense of self and trust in your partner.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things where it could be the big betrayals. It could be the death by 1,000 cuts type. But either way, what we have to learn is how possible it is to heal. But we struggle with all of these symptoms. That was the third discovery. There's actually a collection of symptoms so common to betrayal. It's now known as post-betrayal syndrome.
Wow. All right. So what are those?
Yeah. So we have, on the site, the post-betrayal syndrome quiz to see to what extent people are struggling. I've had easily over 15,000 people take it in the last year and a half or so. Wow. Every age is represented, just about every country. What's so interesting, and I will actually share some stats with you. What's so interesting is, though, there's a question that reads, is there anything else you'd like to share? And people share their stories. Besides,
people want to be heard.
Oh, yeah. And besides,
people want to be heard.
Yeah, the physical, mental, and emotional symptoms. People say things like, we've all heard time heals all wounds, and I have the proof that's not true. Because people say things like, my betrayal happened 40 years ago, I could still feel the hate. My betrayal happened 35 years ago, I'm unwilling to trust. My betrayal happened 10 years ago, feels like it happened yesterday. And we know that when it comes to betrayal, we do not heal with time. It may ease it a bit, but we heal when we face it, feel it, heal it. That's what we've come to know. So I pulled some stats. I'm happy to share some with you.
Yeah, I would love to hear some.
Yeah, because we don't realize, we have these symptoms and we're like, oh, it must be aging. Oh, it must be menopause. Oh, it must be stress. It's because of your unhealed betrayal. Okay. So this is out of 15,000 people. Wow. 78% constantly revisit their experience. 81% feel a loss of personal power. 94% deal with painful triggers. Some of the physical symptoms. 71% have low energy. 68% struggle with their sleep. 47% have weight changes. 45% have digestive issues. IBS, diarrhea, constipation. What's so interesting about that one is think about what the gut does. It absorbs, digests, and processes food. Is it any wonder we're struggling to absorb, digest, and process a betrayal? The gut gets wrecked. That's where your immune system is, 80% of your immune system. So there you go. Mental.
So these are fascinating. Go ahead. I'm excited to hear more.
Yeah. So these are the most common mental symptoms. 78% are overwhelmed. 70% are walking around in a state of disbelief. 68% unable to focus. 64% shock. 62% are unable to concentrate. So imagine you have a gut issue. You can't concentrate. And now you're trying to raise your kids and work. Okay. That's not even the emotional ones.
Right. And you're probably not, because you've moved on, perhaps. Moving on does not mean it's healed.
No. No, not at all.
And that's, I think, what you're saying. And so when we can be open and compassionate to ourselves to connect the dots, to say what's at the root cause.
And here's where we even go to the most well-meaning doctors, coaches, healers, therapists to manage this stress-related issue, disorder, whatever. And at the root of it is an unhealed betrayal. Like you can be going, think about it, you can go to a gut expert for your gut issue, and then you take something to help you sleep, right? And then and I haven't even gotten to the emotional symptoms, but at the root of it has never been dealt with. So that's
what are some of the other ones you've got there?
Yeah. So emotional, 88% extreme sadness, 83% anger. You just mix sadness and anger, and that's exhausting. 82%.
Well, and talk about getting stuck in your gut. I mean, that's going to be all liver and gallbladder. That's going to, we hold our toxins and anger there. So that's going to affect your digestion too.
100%. 80% anxiety, 79% stressed. Here's why I wrote trust again. 84% have an inability to trust. 67% are preventing themselves from forming deep relationships because they're afraid of being hurt again. 82% find it hard to move forward. 90% want to move forward, but they don't know how.
Wow.
Crazy,
those are amazing. Right? So, oh my gosh, I wish I could talk to you for hours, but one of the questions that came up is, did you see in any of your research impact of transgenerational trauma being carried by trust from previous generation? Can you speak to that about that?
Yes, very common, because, unless we're the one to break the chain, it's just what we know. And intergenerational trauma can go on for, decades and years and generations. I remember a study, it was something, I think it was like mice and cherry blossoms. And they would have like the mice would get, let's say, a taste or a smell of cherry blossoms and then get zapped. And then the next generation of mice would smell the cherry blossoms. I may be messing this up a little bit, but you get the general idea.
Yeah.
They would smell the cherry blossoms, no shock, and be frightened. The generation after that would smell the cherry blossoms and show anxiety and be stressed. So it is just, the issues are in the tissues, and if we don't heal this, it doesn't go away.
Yeah. Well, and then we also role model those relationships. So then there's the tangible piece, right? So one is the embodied piece that's in our DNA. I'm always fascinated, and I think because of just my own story of transgenerational trauma and of what we carry in our DNA. And the image I saw was our grandmother's pregnant. So it was like almost a cartoon image where there was, a woman pregnant, and you see this pregnant belly in which there's this fetus, and inside the fetus are eggs. So basically, we were present in our grandmother's lives as the eggs of our mother. And so whatever our grandmother experienced is literally in our DNA. Mm-hmm. And just that visual is so powerful. And then we look at these kind of studies. So whether it's from a spiritual, passing down, a DNA passing down, but then there's also the very tangible, what is being role modeled? So then we are learning behavior patterns to resist, to demonstrate lack of trust, to be in fear or anxiety. I mean, that was part of one of my own pieces of my journey of getting unstuck, was because I was raised with this trauma on a silver platter saying, the world is a scary place. This is how we live. And protect yourself and be safe at all costs. And it was at the cost of my own growth. And so that Anayanin quote of, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bed was greater than the risk to blossom, changed my life, because I had to break that pattern.
Yes. And I say it, I did 2 TEDx talks, and the first one, it was about sabotage. That was 6 weeks after my betrayal. And I remember saying something about when the fear of the unknown becomes greater than the pain of where you are, that's when you jump. And it's so true, but it's what we know. And here's, and I would never tell anybody how to raise their children, and that is, every mom knows best. But what I can share is, in my own experience, my husband was actually the one to tell my kids. And first of all, I think there's something about when your 4 teenagers look at you and they say, you did what to our mom? If anything is going to have you wake up and realize what you just did is that. But they saw a very real experience with me. I didn't want to burden them necessarily with it, but I was real. And
you were authentic. How could you not be? To be inauthentic would to not honor all four aspects: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual.
And now that it's years later, their coping skills, I don't know how they would have developed those coping skills if they never experienced anything, or they didn't see me going right through it right before their eyes. So, it just, looking at it now, I wouldn't want to go through it again, but looking at it now, I see so many of the gifts. And that's the thing. I mean, I didn't do anything anybody else couldn't do. I just was like, this experience is so bad and for me personally, so painful and so unjust that if I can find my way through it, it's got to be for a greater purpose. And
wow.
And so now we have the PBT Institute, and that's one of the biggest reasons why I have our certification program. We certify coaches because they're so excited about their own healing, and they can't help but want to pass it forward. So
it's amazing, Debbie. You're a complete inspiration and a light, and the world is definitely benefiting from everything that you personally have gone through, but been able to put it into tangible tools to guide others. And I love and respect that so much. Thank you so much for sharing all of your story and your wisdom today. Where can people find you if they want to learn more? Because I know that it's going to spark something in a lot of people listening.
I'm sure. Thank you so much. So they should just take the quiz, and they can find that at the PBT, as in post-betrayal transformation, thepbtinstitute.com/quiz.
And we're going to have that link in the show notes. I know that you provided that as well. And really, thank you so much. I have really enjoyed talking with you. I've learned a ton, and I know that I will definitely be referring clients back to your work. And the name of your book that people can find?
Trust Again, Overcoming Betrayal and Regaining Health, Confidence, and Happiness. And really, essentially what it is the study, the dissertation made reader friendly, because I was like, that's just not right. If I could read 250 studies and distill it all, have these discoveries, and only the research committee gets to read it. So,
Well, thank you so much. Take care and
thank you.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat, visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.